I have found that in pretty much any meeting where I've started with or participated in a check-in activity like this, that we all need to be hearing about how hard this is for everybody, and that it's really affirming, even though it can feel like, oh yes, this is overwhelming. It's really affirming to hear that other people are experiencing the same kinds of confusion and frustration and sense of being overwhelmed, just like I am, just like you are. So I always feel like if if PD or meetings like this are also a little bit of counseling, then it means that I've done my job. So now that we've done the counseling part, we're going to start talking about the books. And you'll notice, so there's really only one book in all of the books that I'm going to talk about today that didn't really stick with me or didn't really like impact me, and I'll explain which one that is later. I loved all of these books. So every book that's on this list is a book that I would recommend that you purchase for your library and that you should feel comfortable recommending to students. But you'll also notice, based on how much time I spend talking about each one, which were the ones that were like the books of my heart. So if I fly through some of them, I apologize, but you'll see which ones were the ones that really like stood out to me as I talk about them. Know that you can navigate this these are hyperlinked. So if you want to just skip to one section, you can click on the hyperlink to get to that section. I tried to avoid grouping them by grade level or by genre, because so many of them fit in so many different genres. And in fact, there are some here even that would fit in multiple categories that I did break them up into. I did try to find a variety of books from K to 12. And in fact, every book that's in here I would recommend for adults as well. There isn't a book that I don't think all of us should read on this list. So that's a little bit of background information, and now I'm going to jump into it. I'm really glad that Kathy talked about myself and books. You'll notice that I've tagged the ones in the presentation that are on the myself and books list from this year. You'll also notice that some of the books aren't on there, but largely that's because they've been released in the last year. There are a couple of exceptions to that, but know that if you look for this little symbol, it's on the list that MAME came up with to identify books that are own voices and represent diverse experiences. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is Kent State. This is by Deborah Wiles. All of these books are novels in verse. This is an amazing historical fiction book. And what is so amazing about it is that she's taken this really difficult topic and written about it in a powerful way that enables multiple perspectives to be heard about this controversial topic. So there's historical background information at the beginning of the book. What I've found as I've book talked this book with kids is they have no idea about the Kent State shootings. So they need that historical background before they start reading. And then you'll see on the page here, I wanted to make sure I included a page. She has used the justification and the font style and font size and font itself to demonstrate different perspectives. So this is a right-hand side of a page. We saw it on the news. We knew all about it. We were scared. So this is a community member. This is the community member's wife. Lots of people came to speak at Kent State. That's what a college campus is for. We were learning from and becoming radicals, revolutionaries, thinkers. So you hear all of these different voices with all of these different perspectives. And it's also like the shortest book ever. I think I read this book in like 3 hours total. It is just stunningly done. Awesome historical fiction. So if you have kids who are looking for that historical fiction or who are looking for novels in verse, but typically don't do historical fiction, this is a great entree for them. I would say for this one, in terms of like comprehension level, you're probably looking at 6th grade plus. But maybe in terms of recommending, just because of the difficulty of the content of the topic, 7th grade plus. Clap When You Land is an amazing book by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is, I would say, 8th grade plus. I might have a couple 7th graders that I would recommend it to, but if you know Elizabeth Acevedo, she wrote The Poet X, which is one of my favorite books of all time. This story follows 2 different girls who, one, Yahira, lives in New York City, and the other one, Camino, lives in the Dominican Republic. And they discover on the same day that their dad has been killed in a plane crash, flying from New York to the Dominican Republic. But what they don't know, although you find out very quickly in the book, is that their dad is the same person. So they don't know that each other exists. And they learn that slowly throughout the book. It is told in 2 different perspectives. So like this first chapter is Camino's chapter. It takes place in the Dominican Republic. And you can tell whose chapter it is because it's bold and the airplane is going towards Camino. The writing is just stunning. Elizabeth Acevedo is an incredible poet. Like, I cannot say enough good things about this book. There are some references to like prostitution, but in terms of the language or other, like there's no sex acts or anything like that. So I would feel comfortable recommending it to a mature 7th grader, but it's a pretty solid like 8th grade to 12th grade book. Other Words for Home is another Myself and Books book. The main character, Jude, is a Syrian refugee. So the book starts in Syria, and she and her mom are trying to escape Syria because of the situation in Syria. Her mom is pregnant, and they decide that it would be safer for them to go and live in Ohio with her mom's family. And so it deals with a lot of the experience of what it's like to be a middle grade girl, what it means when she gets her period because she's Muslim, and how she chooses to put on the headscarf, what it's like being at an American school. It's beautiful. I actually listened to this as an audiobook, and it is a beautiful audiobook. And I always appreciate listening to audiobooks when there are words in other languages, because it helps me with the pronunciation. So I would highly recommend the audiobook of this one as well. Redwood and Ponytail, I just finished this yesterday, and it's just lovely. I should have also said about Other Words for Home, 5th grade plus. And then same thing with Redwood and Ponytail. It's just a lovely, lovely story about 2 girls who are in 7th grade, and they meet on the first day of registration before 7th grade starts. And they very quickly discover that they are interested in one another. So Tam is Redwood. She's really tall. She is an outstanding volleyball player. She is not at all girly in the traditional sense of the word. She is strong. She is powerful, and she pretty much knows what she wants. Kate, on the other hand, is the captain, or trying to be the captain of the cheerleaders. and has the perfect bow and the perfect hair, and the mom who wants her to do all of the perfect things and live up to mom's perfect expectations. Um, for some of the book, they each have their own page, but the author, K.A. Holt, does a really lovely job where some of the poems are together on the page, like you see here, where you are hearing both people's perspective at the same time, and then there's common language in the middle. It's a quick read, and the poetry is not difficult, but the I don't want to call it a love story so much as a like story is just really well done. And K.A. Holt talks about how important it is for her. This is an Own Voices book. She is a lesbian, and she wanted to make sure that there were books out there for other girls who were experiencing these same kinds of feelings in upper elementary school and middle school. So highly recommend Redwood and Ponytail. I loved this one. Where are we? Okay, so I'm gonna try and speed it up a little bit. I knew this was gonna happen. Judy and I were talking yesterday, and I was like, I don't know if I have enough stuff to fill for 45 minutes or an hour. And every time I end up going over because I start talking about books and then I can't stop myself. So picture books. Oh, there are so many beautiful picture books out right now. It is a great time to be using picture books in classrooms. This book in particular just really spoke to me. It was just recently released. It's gotten lots of buzz that it might win one of the big awards this year. It's made by the same people who wrote Crown and Ode to the Fresh Cut. Part of why I love this book so much is because there's been a lot of conversation about how books about Black boys in particular tend to focus on trauma and negative experiences. And that's going to be true for some of the books that I recommend later on the list as well. But that we should also be reading and sharing and recommending books that are about Black boys doing normal, everyday things and experiencing life. So this book follows many different Black boys. Each page has these beautiful illustrations with poetry, like writing to go with it. So this page says, I am one eye open, one eye closed, peeking through a microscope, gazing through a telescope, checking out the spaces around me, and plotting out those far off places I have yet to go, but will. Just stunning. I can't recommend this one highly enough. Julian is a Mermaid is a little bit older. This is sort of earlier elementary. There are not a ton of words on the page. Part of what struck me about this book are the illustrations. I love the process here. So Julian is on the subway with his grandma, and he sees these women who are dressed up as mermaids. And while he's on the subway, he has this imagination that runs wild about what it would be like for him to be a mermaid. And so the book is really about the acceptance of gender fluidity and performing your gender in whatever way you are comfortable with. I will say that Jessica Love is cis, and so this is not actually an Own Voices book. She's a cis white woman. But I think the message here for right now, until there are more books that are Own Voices that deal with gender fluidity, this is a pretty important book to have out there. And the illustrations, I mean, I just love the transition that Julian goes through, right? So here he's sitting on the subway, and you can see as he's sort of disrobing and his hair is getting longer and he's imagining himself swimming. And the watercolors go along with the whole sort of water mermaid thing. And it's a lovely story. Your Name is a Song. Uh, this is such an important, I feel like all teachers need to read this book um, for themselves about the importance of recognizing and pronouncing students' names correctly. This follows the main character who comes home from school and is like, I don't want to go back to school because the teacher couldn't pronounce my name, and it looked like it made her mad that she didn't know how to pronounce my name. And so her mother goes through this whole process about how everybody's name is a song, um, and how if she goes back to school, she can help teach her mom how to pronounce, or teach her teacher how to pronounce her name, and that it is a song, and that it shouldn't be a point of shame for her. She should be able to celebrate her name in powerful ways. So this is one of the pages inside. The illustrations are beautiful, but I also want to show you on Sora. So this is also going to be a little bit of a plug for the Wayne County collection in Sora. At Plymouth Canton this year, our district, because we have been remote, has decided that all of our schools will be part of the Wayne County collection through Sora, through Overdrive. And what's so cool about this is there are tons of picture books on here. And so as teacher librarians, you can use the picture books on Sora and read them out loud to students. So I read this book through Sora online, and it sort of gives you a sense of how you could use this in a classroom on Zoom to be able to do a read aloud with students. And in fact, I think I'm going to read this one to some 7th graders next week. So I'm not coming back ever again, the girl stomped. Please don't stomp unless we're stepping in a drill team, Mama said. Was your first day of school so bad? The girl looked down. No one could say my name, right? And so then they go through all different kinds of names, and you can click through the pages and share with your students that way. So that is also a Myself in Books book. And then this one, it's not going to be a surprise that this one is on the list. It won the Caldecott for 2020. Oh my goodness. I had not read it until I was getting ready for this. And there is a reason that it won the Caldecott. It is just a powerfully done, important book that all kids and all adults should read. So this is The Undefeated by Kwame Alexander and Kadir Nelson in his very Kadir Nelson style. It basically deals with African-American history and talks about historical figures. It is written as poetry, so it's a book in verse, and each page has an incredible illustration and then one of the parts of the poem on it. So this one is from the Civil War. This is for the unafraid, the audacious ones who carried the red, white, and weary blues on the battlefield to save an imperfect Union. So the layers of this book, like I can't even imagine how much work went into this, both for Kwame Alexander and Kadir Nelson. So here you have the text of the poem, then you have references to a Langston Hughes poem in the poem itself, and then in the end notes, for every single page, so this is for the unafraid, you have detailed historical description of what the illustration is showing and what the poem is referring to. It's just, like I can't say enough about this book. It is more of an upper L picture book than some of the other ones that I've shared, because some of the content is pretty intense and the historical information at the back is a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. But I highly, highly recommend this. And I think all adults should be reading this too, as a reminder of of what African Americans have survived and experienced, and what that experience is like in today's America. So good. Before we go into prose, nope, we're not going to do that. I was going to have you go out into breakout rooms and talk about the ones that you've liked so far. I'm not going to do that because we're going to run out of time. So I'm going to talk about some of my favorites now, and then give you some additional recommendations at the end so that we still have some time to do the book slam. Out of all of the books that I am talking about today, this book, like if you pick one book to read from all of the books that I am recommending, this should be the book. Kimberly Brubaker Bradley is known for writing The War That Saved My Life, which is historical fiction. This is not historical fiction. This is realistic fiction about a main character who is, and it's directed, this is like 5th grade plus. It's realistic fiction about sexual abuse, and the main character sort of slowly revealing her own personal story with sexual abuse. And so you might be wondering to yourself, like, how do you write a book for 5th graders and up about sexual abuse? And the fact that she did it, and that she did it with the beauty and power that she wrote this with, is just amazing. So I'm going to read you a page just to give you a sense of what this book is like. The main character's name is Della, or Delicious, which is her full name. I am 10 years old. I'm going to tell you the whole story. Some parts are hard, so I'll leave those for later. I'll start with the easy stuff. My name is Delicious Nevaeh Roberts. Yeah, I know. With a first name like that, why don't I just go by Nevaeh? I never tell anyone my name is Delicious, but it's down in my school records, and teachers usually blurt it out on the first day. I've had a lot of first days lately. If I can get it in before the teacher says delicious out loud, I'll say, I go by Della. I'll say that anyhow. I answer to Della, not delicious, thank you. But it's easier if no one ever hears delicious. Once a boy tried to lick me to see if I was delicious. I kicked him in the... Suki says I can't use bad words, not if I want anybody to read my story. Everybody I know uses bad words all the time, just not written down. Anyway, I kicked him right in the zipper of his blue jeans. Let's say it like that. And it was me that got in trouble. It's always the girl that gets in trouble. It's usually me. Suki didn't care. She said, you stick up for yourself, Della. Don't you take crap from nobody. Can I say crap in a story? Anyhow, she didn't say crap. She said something worse. Let me fix that. Suki says whenever I want to use a bad word, I can say snow, or snowflake, or snowy. I kicked him right in the snow. So that sort of gives you a sense of the ways that Bradley has taken a difficult topic, used humor, the number of times that I laughed out loud at this book, which is unusual for me. And then also the number of times that I cried, often on the same page. I know, like, I'm going to get emotional talking about it. It's so hard to write these stories for kids who are so young, but we know that we have students in our classrooms who have experienced sexual abuse like Della and her sister did. And so to be able to write this gentle, beautiful story that's accessible for maybe end of 4th and 5th graders, to see themselves in stories is just incredibly powerful. And I just get this book. It's so good. Okay, pull it together. Free Lunch is sort of on the same vein as Fighting Words, although it is a true story. It's a memoir. And Rex Ogle talks about his experiences with his mom, who is not always the most stable person, and his sort of stepdad and his half brother. Uh, it is also an incredibly powerful story. And I think if I hadn't read it within a couple weeks of having read Fighting Words, it probably would have affected me even more. The writing just doesn't have the same oomph that Fighting Words does, but it's still a really important story for kids to be reading about what it means to have free lunch and to either be empathizing with students if that isn't their experience, or to see themselves reflected in the pages of a story. Really, really well done. One heads up about this one. So I would say for this one, like 6th grade plus, I'm a little bit of a prude when it comes to some language. Like I would love, like, give me the F word anytime. But the P word, which is in this book, makes me uncomfortable. So heads up about that. If you have students who are a little shy about language, it doesn't have any other swears in it, but that word in particular made me a little bit uncomfortable. So. Oh, show me a sign. I actually read this one this summer, so it's not as present with me, but it is also a really, really important book. Mary is the main character. She lives on Martha's Vineyard in the 1700s, and she is deaf. And it turns out that on Martha's Vineyard during this time, there was a huge deaf population. Like 1 in 4 residents of this town on Martha's Vineyard were deaf. And so they had their own sign language, Martha's Vineyard Sign Language, which actually eventually influenced American Sign Language. It's a really great story about what life was like historical fiction story. So like what life was like on Martha's Vineyard, but also does a really nice job of revealing some of the stories of the other residents of Martha's Vineyard. So you hear about Native American population living on Martha's Vineyard. You hear about escaped slaves living on Martha's Vineyard. There are moments where it feels a little bit too like it's so diversity focused that it's like that it felt a little bit forced. And I will say that the writing didn't draw me in as much as the story and the idea of Mary and what she experienced on Martha's Vineyard. So this wasn't one of those ones where I was just like swept away in the prose, but I was definitely swept away in the storytelling. My husband's grandparents were both deaf, and so for me to like learn some of the experience of deaf culture in early America was pretty powerful as well. This book is a little bit older, but as I was going through my list, I realized that I was a little low on the sort of high school books and that I was missing a lot of fantasy. So I wanted to make sure I called attention to this. Children of Blood and Bone has been out for a little while, but this one just came out. I do have this in my middle school library, but it's really like a 8th grade plus kind of book. It is beautiful African magical fantasy where the people who have magic have been ostracized from the community, and only with the main character's help. So Zelly is the main character. When she realizes that she has magic, are the people with magic able to sort of regain their position in society. It's a beautiful book and does a really nice job of incorporating a lot of African mythology in it as well. So also highly recommend. Oh, so I read this book today, and oh my goodness, this is another one that I feel like if it's not in your collection, it should be. And I actually mean this K-12. You could definitely have 4th and 5th graders read this, but I think it's also appropriate for high school students. It's a true story of Omar Mohammed and his experience in a refugee camp in Kenya. He's Somali, and he and his brother escape from and are actually separated from their mother after having watched their father be killed by the invading army in Somalia. It is the story of the brotherhood and of the relationship between the two of them and the way that the community and the refugee camp comes together. It is definitely an example of people putting an optimistic spin on something that's pretty terrible. Even in the book, you will find like there are moments where things get pretty dark, and then you can sort of hear Omar as story or as an author like trying to bring back the positivity or bring back the positive message, which is why I think it still works for fourth and fifth grade. Because it is a true story, you get to see pictures at the end of Omar and his brother today. And they worked with Victoria Jameson, who's known for Roller Girl, and she is an amazing illustrator and storyteller herself. This should be on your shelf. It's a beautiful book. The illustrations are stunning. I highly recommend it. This is the one book that I didn't have a super strong connection with, but I also realized I was pretty short on like action adventure stuff. So this is a Bruce Lee story. It's pretty like rah Bruce Lee. It is not like a deep dive into his life. I found that I loved the illustrations that were more non-traditional the most, but most of the book follows a pretty standard comic book format. It's still a really nice story, and your kids who are interested in martial arts, who are interested in sort of action adventure stories will really love this. It just wasn't my favorite book of all time. Ooh, and then I'm going to talk about Long Way Down. I mean, this book. So this is originally a book of a novel in verse by Jason Reynolds, and the graphic novel version just came out. And I didn't think that the graphic, I was skeptical. I was like, there's no way that the graphic novel captured what this book is like. And I was totally wrong. Danica I can't pronounce her name, Novgorod. I mean, the art, like it is not at all a traditional graphic novel, comic book style. And the art is, I'm like, I can't, there aren't even words to describe what the art in this book is like. This just gives you one spread to imagine, and all of the pages are this beautiful, and she uses incredible watercolors with oils on top of them. If you haven't read the original book, I highly recommend it, but I think the art just adds even more to it. This is, I would say, 7th grade plus. It's tough. Like the story follows the main character who has just watched his brother be shot. It for sure falls into that category of stories about Black boys being about trauma. And the main character Will has to decide if he's going to follow the rules and go try and kill the person who killed his brother. And so the long way down is him taking the elevator down his apartment complex with a gun in his hand, ready to go kill the person. And on each floor of the elevator, a ghost from his past gets on the elevator with him. Oh, just read the book. You should read the book. This one I'll just talk about briefly, even though everybody should read this book too. I feel like I don't need to talk about it as much because it's the first graphic novel to win the Newbery Award. Like it won the Newbery last year, and rightfully so. It is a great story. If you haven't read it yet, you should read Nude Kid. The second book, which is like a sequel partner to New Kid, Class Act, just came out. I haven't had a chance to read this one yet, but I've also heard amazing things about that. So, oh, I loved this one too. I keep thinking I'm done, and I'm not done. High school, for sure, like ninth grade and up. There's references to sex. There's a lot of references to making out. Laura Jean keeps breaking up with me. The main character is in a relationship. She's in a relationship with Laura Dean. Laura Dean is not a very nice person. She, the main character, sort of abandons her friends and will go hang out with Laura Dean at the drop of a hat. It is not a healthy relationship, and the book sort of follows as the main character discovers that Laura Dean is not a healthy person for her to be with. So good. Loved it. High school. And then this is just a bonus recommendation because this is an adult book. I listened to this on audio. It was amazing. It's a librarian's book. It is about a woman living in Appalachia in the early 1900s who delivers books by like walking them into the Appalachian Mountains to her customers. So if you like that, those stories about librarianship, about the importance of books, about the importance of communities, I just wanted to put in a little plug for this one too. It's just a lovely book. And then here's some additional recommendations about audiobooks because I didn't talk much about audiobooks today. Nerdy Book Club just yesterday published Audiophiles 2020 Best Audiobook. So that link is in the slides as well. Some of them are actually books that I talked about today. But if you want to check this out later, this is on my list to read. Kent State's on there, right? So you should for sure check this out too if you're looking for audiobooks to recommend to people. Oh my gosh, I talked for way too long, but I did manage to finish with 5 minutes left so that we still have a few minutes to do book slam stuff. Does anybody have any questions?